Greetings, everyone. This one's going to be about extinction. In terms of the chapter in your book, I think we're jumping back to chapter 5 here. So, and then we've already covered the chapter 7, which is the intermittent reinforcement to decrease behavior. So we actually already covered that in the last lecture. So if you go back to lecture number 2, according to the Blackboard stuff or the YouTube stuff, I think it says lecture 2. So it's at the last part of that. I just kind of got a little ahead of myself last time. So right now we're going to go ahead and talk about extinction, which is a method of removing behavior, if you will, or decreasing behavior, whichever way you want to look at it. So we'll keep moving on here. All right, so decreasing behavior through extinction. Extinction is going to cause, again, it's a decrease in responding. It's not punishment. It's something quite a bit different than punishment, actually. So we'll just take a look at it here. So the idea is that a behavior is always, if a behavior is happening, it's being reinforced, or it has been reinforced in the past. So you've got the intermittent reinforcement stuff. We've already been over the various schedules. So behavior is happening at a particular schedule. Right? Now, if we change something, then we're going to get a whole unique effect in behavior. And what we need to change is actually remove the reinforcer. So if we remove the reinforcer, okay, for a particular behavior, that is the definition of extinction. A behavior that once was reinforced is now no longer being reinforced. It is being extinguished. Right? So we're going to remove that reinforcer, and then the behavior is going to start to decrease in that situation. Okay, so in that context, that behavior will start to decrease because the organism is learning, or the person is learning, that what worked for me in the past is now no longer working for me, so my behavior is going to start to go down. Okay, of course, there's a little more to it. It never works on the first trial. Not going to happen. In fact, it gets worse on the first couple of trials, but we'll get to that here in a minute. That's next on the next slide. It is a gradual decrease. Right? So this is something that the behavior is. Let's say it's maintained at a fairly high rate. Let's say up here, right? And then we're going to start extinction. Behavior is going to go down, and we're going to keep extinguishing the behavior. It's going to keep going down and down and down, and eventually the probability of that response is going to diminish to 0. Now, it never really truly goes away 100%, and we'll talk about why that is here in a minute. So let's take a look at the slide, see what's going on. All right, so notice on the left here we've got the probability of response, trials across the bottom, and the extinction phase and the baseline phase and all that stuff. So let's get our baseline in here. Okay. So let's just look at that baseline section. I know the graph is all bumpy and stuff. That's all right. That's just the way it is. Okay. So baseline, we're relatively stable. Notice we don't have any numbers on this. That's fine. Okay. Doesn't matter. The numbers at this point don't matter. So the behavior is maintaining at a fairly high rate. That's what we're assuming here with the baseline phase. It's quite a ways up the graph. And notice with the green line there, we start extinction, and the behavior gets worse. Right? That right here, this little spot right there, that's your extinction burst. Okay? Extinction bursts happen. They're evil, and they happen. So I've got some more slides on here. Are coming up later here tonight to talk about the extinction burst, I do believe. Yep. And so I won't go into it in much more detail, but you notice that the baseline is nice and stable. Then your extinction burst, that's this bulge right here, right? So the behavior's getting worse, the probability or the frequency of response is increasing, and then it starts to gradually decrease until we get down to the 0 level. Okay? So that is extinction. Just keep in mind that the behavior is happening, but you're not reinforcing it. The behavior is occurring, but there's no reinforcement. Behavior occurs, no reinforcement. So here's an example where you have a lot of behavior and you don't have any reinforcers that are following that behavior. Eventually the behavior goes away. It doesn't happen right away. So it's one of those things that is part of the art of learning how to be a behavior manager, is to realize that just as soon as you yank reinforcement doesn't mean behavior is going to stop immediately. It takes a little while. It's like the organism has learned that I have to be persistent. In fact, persistence really is resistance to extinction. So we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, factors influencing it. Control of the reinforcers. If you don't have access to the reinforcer, if you don't have control over that reinforcer, you're never going to be able to extinguish a response. Think about it this way. Cigarette smoking produces reinforcers. We've gone over some of those in the past, but here they are again. Number 1, positive reinforcers. The nicotine is added. Negative reinforcers. The withdrawal feelings the withdrawal symptoms are decreased. The stress is decreased. We don't have control over those reinforcers. If the reinforcer for smoking a cigarette is actually the nicotine, let's look at the nicotine alone. The nicotine alone is delivered immediately. You don't have access to that. You can't block that nicotine. Well, you kind of can, maybe with a drug and prevent the absorption of the nicotine, but that's another issue, right? So really, you can't extinguish cigarette smoking behavior. Now, let's say you got a kid in your classroom and they're engaging in an inappropriate behavior, and when they do, you typically give them attention and tell them to stop. Well, it may be that your attention is reinforcing them. If that's what's going on, if it's your attention that's reinforcing the kid, then, well, guess what? You need to stop giving attention for inappropriate behavior. Right? Will that automatically make the kid an angel in the classroom? No, you're going to have to do other stuff. But the idea is you need to have control over the source of the reinforcers, so the reinforcers themselves, in order to remove access to them. If you do not have that, you will not be successful within the extinction. Why? Because the definition of extinction is to remove the reinforcement. If you don't have access to those reinforcers, you can't do extinction. Right? In other words, other people can screw with you. You're working on an extinction procedure. You got the kid that's being inappropriate in the classroom, and you're trying to put that behavior on extinction. Next thing you know, the kid starts to act out, and the other kids in the class start laughing. Oops, they just reinforced it. Right? So you didn't have access to those reinforcers. You didn't know they were going to happen. You couldn't control it. Not your fault. Not a problem either. It's just something you're going to have to deal with down the road. It's just realize that other people can affect your extinction stuff. This is oftentimes what happens is that a learner will learn to behave in one setting in one way and something else another way in another setting. And we'll get to those slides here eventually. That's looking at stimulus control stuff. But the idea is that you can put the behavior on extinction, but you might not get rid of that behavior completely, especially across the board. It'll likely happen when you are, other people will reinforce the behavior, and just the person might learn not to behave inappropriately in front of you. So it doesn't. This is what I was just talking about. It doesn't generalize different environments. Right? Extinction in one context is extinction, and then you go to a new environment, and that other that once extinguished behavior is probably still going to persist in that other environment because the person hasn't learned that it doesn't work here. This is like swearing in front of your parents and swearing in front of grandma. Mom might get it on extinction, but grandma might never bother. Right? It's like, oh, whatever. The kid's swearing, no big deal. In order to actually implement extinction, you need to identify what the reinforcers are. And in order to truly identify a reinforcer, you need to do a functional assessment. Right? So you must ensure that the behavior, or that the reinforcer being withheld, is the one that's actually maintaining the behavior. Right? So I got these M&Ms. Okay? So if M&Ms are what's maintaining my behavior, when we do a functional behavioral assessment, I'm going to snack on M&M here, and we do a functional behavioral assessment, well, the idea is that by me eating the M&M, it might be reinforcing whatever behavior I was just doing. So if that's the case, when we can identify that, then go ahead and try to control access to the M&Ms. If you can control access to the M&Ms, then you'll likely decrease the particular behavior, and you'll be successful. We'll start to extinguish. If you didn't do a functional assessment, you're only guessing about what behaviors are really maintaining behavior, and then you're going to be a little bit haphazard in your application. Feel free to give it a shot, but it just might not be successful. I'm going to finish my M&M. All right. That was good. Hopefully it reinforced me giving video lectures. I doubt it, but we'll see. All right. Oftentimes when you are using extinction, what you want to do is reinforce the proper response. In fact, if you go back and watch some of those videos that I posted on, what are they? Nanny 911. If you watch those Nanny 911 videos, you'll see that a lot, where the nanny's saying, okay, if the inappropriate behavior is happening, ignore it. But then, so there's the extinction, ignore the inappropriate behavior, but also reinforce the appropriate behavior. That way the kid learns that this isn't working in this environment, but something else is. And that something else is it's going to give you access to those reinforcers that you once were getting for the behavior that you're now trying to extinguish. So which leads me to another point, and we'll probably come back to that here in a few minutes, but I want to hit it now. The idea is that if an inappropriate behavior is maintained by a reinforcer X, you want an appropriate behavior to take its place and be reinforced by that same reinforcer. So you're just trying to swap out behaviors. And that's a really good approach to take with regard to extinction, is always extinguishing one and building up another. You'll be much more successful. Again, try to use that same reinforcer if possible. That's a very natural sort of thing to do. It's not as contrived. Right? The setting is a major issue here. Right? You do want to, so the context is an important thing. So think of the kid in the classroom, starts behaving inappropriately. There's all sorts of other reinforcement that's going to be available. And that's what that thing says, is minimize alternative SR, stimulus that reinforces. So minimize reinforcement, other reinforcement. So if you can get control of those other kids in the class that are giving them attention, if you can get control other teachers that might be giving the kid attention for inappropriate behavior, the idea is minimize other sources of reinforcement for this kiddo. All right, and maximize the chance that the behavior modifier is taking with the program. So by minimizing those other alternatives, their sources of reinforcement, and that you are now, the reinforcers that you are giving for appropriate behavior, like we talked about above, are going to be rich, they're going to be important, right? Because you've minimized access to alternative reinforcers. Right? So that's going to then maximize the chance that the person doing the modification will stick with the program. Okay, we got to remember that the person that's doing the behavior modification program, not the student here, all right, not the child that's getting their behavior changed. We're talking about the person that is the behavior analyst. That behavior analyst is under all these constraints as well. Our behavior is reinforced, our behavior is punished. So if you're trying to use extinction and you're failing at it, you'll be less likely to use extinction in the future. Makes sense, right? Why? Because because your behavior of using extinction is being extinguished. So in order to put this in your toolkit, so to speak, you need to be successful with it. And part of being successful with it is just minimizing access to those other reinforcers. All right, more factors. Rules. All right, good thing to always use is rules. All right, again, we've talked about this. This is verbal stuff. If you say, here's what's going to get you reinforced, here's what's no longer acceptable and will not get you any attention, but here's what will get you attention. That's a good way to do it, right? So the extinction is set up. It's very clear as to what you expect as the behavior modifier, and it's clear to the person that's involved in your change program. Extinction produces aggression. Okay? It also produces frustration. Frustration is related to aggression. So sometimes it's going to people are going to get pissed. Okay? Think of it this way. You've been doing something for X number of years. You've always been getting away with it. You're getting a reinforcer for it. And all of a sudden, you're no longer getting a reinforcer for it. You're no longer getting something out of it. Yeah, you'd probably be pretty pissed too. Right? Or at the very least, frustrated. In fact, frustration, when you start to analyze it, what it really is failure to access a reinforcer. So frustration is really a very natural byproduct of extinction, because with extinction, you're withholding access to a reinforcer, which will automatically produce frustration. Because in the past, you've been reinforced for it. So behavior X no longer going to work because now it's on extinction, but you were always reinforced in the past. You're going to get frustrated, and you're going to try harder. Think about the pop machine, right? So you're at the pop machine, you press the button, it doesn't give you your Coke or whatever, so you press the button again. But you also get a little frustrated, like, oh really? You're like, the damn machine, you just took my $1, right? And then if you keep pressing the button and it doesn't work, you're going to start to get really frustrated, right? And you'll keep expressing about how the machine ate your money. You might even make a little sign and stick it on there. Some people get aggressive and kick the machine, right? Or shake it or do something like that. So, but those are all normal things that happen as a result of extinction. This even happens in the animal world, by the way. That's not just a uniquely human thing. So. All right, let's look in more detail at this extinction burst, because it's kind of a useful thing. So we're going to look at our baseline here. There's our extinction phase. So there's the burst right there. Bingo. Okay. If you're using extinction, if you're a behavior modifier and you're using extinction, guess what? You see the behavior get worse, you're on the right track. Don't give up. Okay? Too many people try to use extinction. They see it getting worse, and then what do? They give up, right? Because the behavior got worse. So they conclude, incorrectly by the way, extinction didn't work. It's a useless process. It doesn't work. It sucks. Blah blah blah. Well, no. The extinction procedure was working because the behavior got worse before it got better. Okay? Here's the danger. If you give up, so think of the kid in the store, right? So the kid in the store, right over here during the baseline, you're throwing a temper tantrum, right? So you got this nasty little tantrum going on. But the idea is, again, we got a kid in the store. They're throwing a tantrum, so they got a pretty serious tantrum going on. Parents have had enough, so they decide, I'm going to try and put this on extinction. So by extinguishing it, they're not going to give the kid the M&Ms, right? So that's tasty M&Ms. So the kid's going to scream away, I want M&Ms, I want M&Ms, and they're not going to give in, all right? So they've made an agreement to stick with it and be serious about it. They heard about extinction, so they're going to give this a shot. And what do they know? The tantrum gets worse. A behavior analyst is going to say, good, that means you're on the right track, keep it up. But somebody that's not completely familiar with extinction is going to think that they just ruined the behavior. So what they do, they give in because they want that behavior to go away, right? So there's your giving in right there. The moment you give in, now you could get an idea what's going to go on here, right? So your baseline was at one level. Now you just reinforce behavior at a higher level. Guess where your new baseline is going to be? Okay, that's that extended line there. And then now you as the parent realize, oh my gosh, this is just getting worse. I want to extinguish it again. Well, guess what? It's going to get even worse yet. So the red line that intersects the y-axis there is basically showing you how high that behavior went from baseline. So where it was already a problem at baseline, and then you started extinction, you didn't wait, you didn't let it continue, right? And bingo, you made the behavior worse. Ultimately, what's going on here is this is the power of intermittent reinforcement, right? So you put the behavior on, the behavior was at baseline, the kid throwing tantrums, and then you put it on extinction, no reinforcers, right? So now it's going to get a little bit worse, but then you screwed up and you reinforced after that. So now you went from maybe a situation where the kid was only getting reinforced every once in a while for the or getting reinforced for the tantrums quite regularly. That was the baseline stage, and then you started extinction, and which by definition then means you're now on an intermittent situation. You've got no reinforcers coming for that behavior. But then at that red point, you actually reinforced it. So now you set up from a continuous, possibly during baseline, to an intermittent schedule of reinforcement. Intermittent schedules are much harder to extinguish than continuous schedules, and they hold more behavior, so to speak. So by screwing up a little bit right there during that first extinction phase, then not letting it continue, you screwed up a couple of things. Number one, you reinforced the behavior at a higher rate, okay, and then you also put the behavior on an intermittent schedule, which makes it more resistant to extinction in the future, making your problem that much harder to deal with. So if again, you'll see that extinction burst a second time, and it takes even longer for it to carry out. So that's the problem with doing this stuff. So extinction works. There's no question about it. Once you have control over the appropriate reinforcer, you'll know because the behavior is getting worse. That's a good thing, right? Because it's about ready to get better. So the fact that it's getting worse signals to you that you found the correct reinforcer. Stick with it. Okay? Don't give in, because you're going to end up doing this causing this sort of graph. And why might it be that people give in? Think about that for a second. You're the parent in the store, right? Kid's throwing a tantrum, screaming, and then all of a sudden they start screaming worse, like screaming bloody murder, and I'm not going to show you, I'm not going to demonstrate that for you, but you get the idea. They're going absolutely insane. What are you going to do? You're going to be embarrassed, right? Everybody's going to be looking at you. People are going to be maybe freaking out, thinking you're beating your child or something. But you're the parent. You know what's going on. Don't worry as much about those other people if you can. The problem is that they've got control over your behavior too. So actually implementing an extinction procedure in that type of setting can be very difficult. But people do it, regularly people do it. So the next time you're in the store and you see a parent, got their kid on extinction, and the behavior and the kid's just screaming away, go up and give the parent a reinforcer. Because trust me, they need it, right? Because the kid's screaming is definitely not reinforcing their behavior of using extinction, trying to get the kid to stop screaming. So drop up, give them a reinforcer, say, hey, I know what you're doing, keep it up, something like that. Who knows? It might work, it might not. All right, more factors. Okay. The schedule of reinforcement. So we're going to look at the continuous schedules and the fixed ratio schedules and a variable interval schedule. All right. So what I want you to notice here is that the difference in terms of the extinction burst and the rate at which the behavior goes away. So the idea behind the rate is the steepness of that extinction line. So the idea here, we've got behavior on extinction. So probability of response is at one level at baseline. We're going to put it on extinction. Notice that it bumps up a little bit, not much, just a little bit, and then it drops off really quick to near zero and stays there. Right? That's what you see with a continuous reinforcement schedule, soda machine. Every time you press the button after you put in your money, you get a reinforcer. Press the button, get a reinforcer. Press the button, get a reinforcer, right? And that's pretty standard. But if we use something a little bit different, if we use a fixed ratio schedule, which is on average, or not average, but after a fixed number of responses, you will then get a reinforcer. So we could set up a pop machine to be an FR5, to where that you have to hit that button 5 times before it delivers a pop, right? And you only put in your $1.50, but you got to press the button 5 times. Okay? So we're going to press that button 5 times. Notice what it does to the extinction burst. It causes it to go bigger. And it also delays that, the extinction doesn't happen as fast. It's not as steep. It's close, but it's not quite as steep. All right. Now let's watch what happens with with another type of intermittent schedule, the variable interval. Look at that extinction burst, right? So that orange line now. So that extinction burst is way up there. Right? It's really high. Took a while to get it up there, and look at how long it takes for that behavior to go away. So variable intervals, which is on average, behavior will be reinforced after a certain amount of time has passed. So if you see a variable interval or a variable ratio, those things are really resistant to extinction. If you see a fixed ratio or a fixed interval, they're not quite as resistant to extinction as a variable one, but they're more resistant than a continuous schedule. Continuous schedules, behavior is easy to extinguish. Now, you might ask the question, why? Right. Well, if you recall back to 324, your book covered something called the partial reinforcement extinction effect. In a nutshell, there's like 5 different hypotheses that are associated with the but the one that I subscribe to, the one that I think is the most valid, is the one that says the person is unable to realize, or the animal is unable to realize, that they are on extinction, because if they have been on a variable schedule of reinforcement in the past, or an intermittent schedule, I should say. So if they've been on an intermittent schedule in the past, their behavior isn't reinforced every time. So now when you start extinction, they're not going to realize that they're no longer going to get reinforced. Why? Because their behavior wasn't reinforced every single time. So it takes a while for an organism or a person to realize that they're on extinction if their behavior has been on intermittent reinforcement in the past. Continuous, you know right away. You know the moment that soda machine isn't working because it's not giving you your pop and you're pissed, right? So with continuous reinforcement, there's no partial reinforcement extinction effect, because it wasn't partially reinforced, it was continuously reinforced. And again, the one that I subscribe to is the one that people just basically not realizing, not able to detect that they're on extinction. That's kind of the way I feel about it. All right. Questions, send them to me, and or stop by the office. I'll talk to you in a little bit with another lecture.